Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Leadership and Diversity. Leadership and Diversity. So with diversity, we're not just talking about race here. It's really important to remember that. We're talking about everything that makes us different. All right. And that could be anything from race, ability, physical ability, mental ability, in some cases, sexual orientation, and gender. And I know I'm probably missing something. Age diversity, group membership diversity. All right, this isn't just a race thing, so it's really important to remember that. Cultural diversity is increasing globally. This is something that not just America is grappling with. It's something that we are paying attention to as a human society. All right. Diversity management is taking advanced advantage of the benefits of a diverse workforce while coping with the problems that arise. All right. So the goal of any leader when managing diversity is to enable all of your followers to achieve their full potential. Um, there should not be any stop gaps according to age, ability, gender, race, sexual orientation, whatever. Okay? It is important that we understand our cultural differences. Understanding cultural differences. Culture is the total way of life of a people. So when we're talking about culture, we're talking about how we do things, how we think. Okay, cultural elements, there are several cultural elements that fit under culture. Communication patterns, how we communicate with each other, verbal or nonverbal, patterns of relationships, formal organizations, artifacts or tools, collective wisdom, and external environments like climate, geography, natural resources. Great example, part of Louisiana culture is hurricanes. Okay, not the alcoholic drink, like hurricanes. Okay, thinking about climate. Classifying cultures. Hall classifies cultures between high context and low context. High context cultures, um, meaning is found in the context or the setting. Okay, um, indirect communication is probably the strong suit, and people like to avoid conflict. Okay, low context, we take conflict head on, and meaning is embedded in the words that we're saying to each other. So Hofstede offers some programmed values patterns. He's got several patterns here. I think there's 6. First, we have power distance. Comfortable. We have a couple of examples of places that are comfortable with inequality. The Philippines, Mexico, comfortable with inequality, or uncomfortable with status and power differences. New Zealand or Israel. All right, individualism versus collectivism puts the individual and immediate family first. Puts the individual and immediate family first. No surprise there. United States and Australia. Okay, putting the group needs first. We're looking at places such as Colombia or Pakistan. Um, when talking about masculinity and femininity, all right, we have a separation of gender roles and dominant males, okay, in Japan and Austria. Um, we have gender or sex roles that kind of overlap in areas such as Sweden and Norway. Uncertainty avoidance, seeking security and rules. Okay, you'll find that in Greece or Portugal. And comfortable with unstructured, unpredictable situations. Jamaica, or Ireland. And lastly, we have long-term or short-term orientation. All right, sacrificing for long-term gain. Sacrificing for long-term gain, and we have none other than China. China and Japan, focusing on the past and the present, Pakistan and Nigeria. Okay, classifying cultures. The globe studies. This is something that's added to Hofstede's dimensions, and the following were added: assertiveness, performance orientation, and humane orientation. With assertiveness, we have the assertive and aggressive versus the modest or tender, okay? That famous saying about Switzerland, they stay out of everything, right? If you've ever heard anyone say, I'm Switzerland, that means that they don't want anything to do with it. They're just going to stay out of it, right? Performance orientation, encourage and rewarding performance versus valuing family background and group membership. And lastly, we have humane orientation, encouraging fairness and altruism versus valuing power, positions, and self-interest. Power, positions, and self-interest. And here are the globe leadership styles. Globe leadership styles for still talking about diversity here. Charismatic and value-based. Okay, these are our inspirational, high-performance leaders. Team-oriented. These are the leaders that are really good at putting together teams for a common purpose. Participative, involving followers and non-authoritarian, humane-oriented, supportive, considerate, and compassionate, obviously thinking about the people first, right? Autonomous, independent, and individualistic, and self-protective, ensures safety of the leader and the group. I don't know why I was going to say overprotective. Protective, ensuring safety of the leader and the group. Successful leaders recognize and respond to cultural differences and use the appropriate leadership style. So you may need a leadership style for as team oriented for 1 week, and with a completely different situation, you may have to move to autonomous. Right? It really depends on the situation, and it depends on the collective culture as well. So just like we have emotional intelligence, we also have cultural intelligence, which is the ability to function effectively in culturally diverse settings. Culturally diverse settings. All right, cultural intelligence factors. There are 4. Metacognitive CQ, or cultural quotient, talks about your cultural awareness. How much are you, your mindfulness, okay? Cultural awareness. How much are you aware of what's going on? Your cognitive CQ, knowledge of a particular culture. Motivational CQ, desire to learn and interact with other cultures. And lastly, behavioral CQ, the ability to communicate in cross-cultural settings, which for some people can be a little bit intimidating. But as long as you're, out there trying, you're getting more experience than others. All right. You can build your CQ through cross-cultural experiences and classes. And like I said before, it always helps to put yourself in different situations that you wouldn't normally be in. Cultural synergy. Cultural synergy is defined as the production of an end product greater than the sum of its cultural parts, drawing upon diversity to create a better than expected solution. There's a process to cultural synergy. The synergistic problem-solving process has 4 steps. Number one is identifying the dilemma or the conflict. What's the problem? What's the problem, okay? Number two, determine why members of other cultures think and act as they do. Identify similarities and differences. One of the biggest questions, most important questions you can ask yourself culturally in thinking about diversity is why. Why people do what they do. There is always a reason, whether they realize it or not, or whether you realize it or not. Number three, ask what individuals can contribute to people of other cultures. Ask what individuals can contribute to people of other cultures. This is kind of a weird question because there's always something to contribute. You just have to figure out what it is. Number four, implementation of a solution sensitive to cultural differences. Implement something that's going to work for everybody. Okay. And when it comes to fostering diversity, there are a lot of advantages to fostering diversity. I mean, in the case of business, we're saving money, we're expanding our market share, we're making better decisions because we're getting exposure to people who are not like us, right? We have higher performance because everyone wants to be a part of the organization and they feel like they have something to contribute. And more importantly, they feel like they are seen. Okay, adopting a learning and effectiveness perspective which recognizes cultural differences as valuable assets. We do have some obstacles to diversity. This sounds all well and good and a bit lofty, but it gets a little complicated when you're trying to make an organization diverse. What we've seen in the past couple of years, just with big organizations, and they're very successful, and we go look at how many who's taking able to take advantage of that success or contributing to that success, or why they have the problems that they have, and you go and look at their diversity reports or their environment, you realize that it's actually not diverse at all. Prejudice. Here's some obstacles to diversity: prejudice, negative attitudes toward others of different backgrounds, which is probably has always been an issue for some time. Anyone is capable of being prejudiced. Stereotyping, classifying groups according to their similarities. Classifying groups according to their similarities. I saw one really interesting TED talk where the speaker said the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but it is that they are incomplete, which I thought was a very poignant way to say stop using stereotypes. And next we have ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, measuring others against our culture, right? Our culture is the standard, and if you are not anything like our culture, then you're wrong. Okay, that's not the correct way to look at things, and it stops us from learning. It also stops other diverse individuals from being able to contribute to organizations. And organizational practices or systemic practices, long work weeks, self promotion, and inaccessible facilities definitely add to obstacles of diversity. So, in order to overcome diversity barriers, there are some things that individuals can do, whether you're a leader or a follower, and there are things that your organizations can do. So, first, as an individual, you want to apply cultural intelligence. You need to really see, what's your CQ, your cultural quotient, all right, and try to improve that as much as you possibly can, really every day. All right, expose yourself to something new, different, every day. Promote dignity, integrity, and inclusion. Promoting dignity, integrity, and inclusion. Everyone should be able to be included in whatever's going on in an organization. Engage in mindful communication. Engaging in mindful communication, which means creating new categories, welcome with new information, and openness to different points of view. That's a big one. Again, something that's easy to say and harder to do. So, organization-wide strategies, we're talking about getting the buy-in of top leadership. So, anything that happens in an organization, that comes from the top down. Even if the leadership didn't know about it, even if they didn't agree with it, they should have known about it. They should have, found put their 2 cents in and been a part of a decision. Employ data-driven strategies. Employing data-driven strategies. That doesn't mean that you have to go build a robot and do all bunch of calculus and whatever to find out how to bring more diversity into your organization. Just count how many types of people you have in your organization. All right, and start from there. Promote diversity education. Promoting diversity education. This sounds like a big deal, but this is all we're talking about here is learning from each other. All right, whenever you hear the words diversity education, we're just talking about learning from each other, okay? Develop systems that support diversity goals. Developing systems that support diversity goals. You see a lot of organizations, sometimes they have really, really good goals for diversity, but they don't actually do anything to implement those diversity goals, and then nothing happens, and then next year they just roll over the next group of diversity goals, and they're the exact same from last year, right? But nobody's really paying attention except the people who are diverse in some cases, all right? You want to kind of keep that in mind. Follow up and measure your progress. So it's not just enough to have these goals and then start working towards them, but you want to have some type of progression towards it. You want to be able to say, okay, first we had this many culturally different or diverse people in our organization. This year we've increased that by 2. This year we've increased that by 5, or we decreased it by 2 or 7 or whatever. Here's the reason why. Here's what we're going to do to fix that. Or if you don't think it needs to be fixed. All right. Having a paper trail of what's going on is very important for the organization. So specifically talking about gender leadership gaps, we have a couple of metaphors to describe why there are fewer women leaders. And these include the glass ceiling, which I'm sure you've heard of, but also the glass cliff and the labyrinth. So the glass ceiling is what is used to describe the barrier to top level leadership for women. Like you can only go up so high, right? Glass cliff, women feeling highly risky leadership positions, which often leads to failure, which a lot of people would say what happened to the female CEO of Yahoo. Labyrinth. There are twisting, confusing paths for female leaders to follow in leadership positions. Research reveals that there are only small differences in how males and females lead. So maybe pop culture or history will have you think that, women are, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And it's not necessarily that complicated. However, women have the potential to be better transformational leaders. The gender leadership gap is largely created by stereotypes of female leaders and double binds, which are women faced with no win choices. Both of these are dangerous to potential female leaders. So narrowing the gap is going to come from agency and communion. Women need to be both tough and decisive, as well as warm and caring. It's also a good idea to build social capital through good relationships. One of the most interesting studies I read for women in leadership was about mentorships. That's something that has been very easily attainable for men, is mentorships. Not so much for women. We need to be mentored, and I wouldn't say necessarily by other women. We just need to be mentored. Um, whoever you want to be, or whatever position you want in life, you should try to get mentored by that person to figure out how they got there. Uh, Becoming linguistic role models. Senior women leaders should demonstrate how to do authority, politeness, and humor. Again, talking about that mentorship aspect. Challenge discrimination and dysfunctional communication patterns. Challenging discrimination, dysfunctional communication patterns, like contesting sexist language, negative terms, masculine metaphors, generalization, gossip, and mean talk, quote unquote. Confronting exclusion, dismissal of contributions, retaliation, and patronizing responses. I would say the higher you go up in an organization, the harder it is to challenge this type of discrimination, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Oh, and I would also say this was not, these last couple of slides were not specific to women. Um, Guys, it's also your job as well to foster a diverse environment that includes female leadership. It's also going to be advantageous for you as well.